Right, so it's recording now, guys. So, welcome to today's session. Okay, my name's Steve Millward, and I'll be guiding you through this. It should take approximately about an hour. Obviously, I'm going to give you a lot of information here. If you do have any questions, as I said before, please feel free to put your hand up, and I'll come to you. I'll get a notification to say you put your hand up, and I'll come to you, and we can unmute, and then we can ask our questions. As part of this, you will be advised to take some notes, because this is in preparation for your final exams, which should be taking place in the next week or two. You'll be glad to know. We are opening our doors for assessment days next week. I say next week, yeah, Monday the 15th is when we'll be opening up. And of course, once you've completed this, you'll be offered an appointment to come in and see us. And hopefully that won't be too long. Probably the week after, I would imagine. I think there's plenty of space on there, and you guys will obviously be the first to be invited to that because you've been on today's session. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing. Okay, so today what we're going to achieve, or what we intend to achieve, is so that you will know a little bit about what substances are commonly misused and why. Recognise possible signs of substance misuse. Be aware of the social and personal effects of substance misuse, and of course, be aware of the perceptions and the responses to substance misuse. Okay. The reason why we're doing this is because obviously when you go out and become a taxi driver, you are going to come into contact with a lot of people and a lot of possibilities around substance misuse. There's been an increased amount of evidence to say that even drivers of licensed transport have I've seen a rise in the use of substances. Now, of course, you might think, well, that sounds a bit shocking, people using illegal drugs behind the wheel. But you'll find throughout this session that there's more to substance misuse than drinking drugs. Okay. How we're going to do that is we're going to look at lots of little things that we'll be looking at today and break it down for you. So we'll look at why people abuse substances. So we'll state the reasons. Identify the types, give examples, identify factors from a person's background that might lead them to misuse substances. We'll look for possible signs and symptoms that may indicate substance misuse. We'll also identify possible signs and symptoms which may be misleading. So in other words, why you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, why you shouldn't assume that everyone coming up to your particular vehicle of an evening may be inebriated in some way or another. And there has been some highly publicised cases recently where people have assumed that people have been drunk and refused them access to vehicles or access to buildings, when in fact that they've been shown disabilities, and we'll look at those a little bit later on. We'll look at the harmful effects of substance misuse on individuals, so we'll look at the side effects of short and long-term use, the harmful effects on society, and then we'll give examples, or you will actually go away and find out examples where you can get support for that. And I'll give you the ideas of where you'll be looking at there. We'll look at stereotyping and how it affects individuals. And we'll also look at how the media can affect our portrayal and our ideas of what is substance misuse. We'll also look at stats and figures. We'll look at where people can get information on drug and substance misuse, and of course we'll have a brief look at how we can respond to substance misuse. Obviously all of you guys will have your own opinions on this, and some of you may be pro or anti-drug use, or some people might think it's not as bad as some other people might say. We're not really here to iron out all those iniquities. There's been some very, very clever people and well-paid people who spend all their time discussing the problem that's substance abuse in this country, and they're yet to come up with the perfect solution. So somehow I don't think we're going to manage that in the next hour, really. Okay, so first of all, what is meant by substance misuse? It says debate, but I'll be doing the talking for a small period of time. You might all have an idea of what you think of substance misuse. You might be thinking drugs, you might be thinking alcohol, but of course it's a wider range. And it's about the misuse of these things. Generally, when substances are illegal, they're considered to be misused, okay? Especially when they're mind-altering. But there are plenty of other substances that people can use or have that they can misuse in a different way. And effectively, it's the harmful use of these particular substances for non-medical purposes. Yeah, it often refers to illegal drugs. However, I see somebody taking a photograph of me here. This is going to be recorded and I'll make it available to you later on. You'll be sent a link so you can access this at any given time. And of course, use it as part of your revision plan. Okay. Legal substances can be misused. Obviously, alcohol mentioned before, prescription medications, caffeine, nicotine, and other volatile substances like solvents. Okay, and we'll look at a range of those. But first of all, I'd like to have a little discussion with you, or a little prompt with you of why people misuse. And I'm going to give you a little range of ideas there. So people might misuse drugs for fun. Yeah, that's, you know, the party drugs, the people who go out and they want to have a good time, whether it's alcohol, drugs, balloons, as they call them, the laughing gas. They call them little balloons, but all I see is little silver canisters on the floor. People might do it out of boredom. I know an awful lot of people who, since being on lockdown and not being able to go anywhere, have increased their alcohol intake. Whether that's because they just think they're constantly off work, or whether that's through boredom, who knows. Curiosity. A lot of people want to know what it's like. A lot of people have, you know, hear stuff about drink and drugs and substances and might think, well, I'm going to have a little look at that. And then, of course, there's peer pressure. Their friends do it, so they feel that they need to. Probably one of the biggest causes of the increase in substance misuse in our youngsters, especially the age 16 to 24. Confidence. People might use drugs to boost their confidence because they have low self-esteem. Yeah. You might have heard phrases like Dutch courage, when people drink, and it gives them the courage to maybe be confrontational, to go and iron out problems with friends or family, or to go over and chat up somebody in a pub or a bar or somewhere like that. Upbringing could be a part. It could be a cultural thing. You know, certain areas where people use drugs as part of society, whether it's, you know, it's been normalized. I know in some places when I growing up, you know, some people were very much into drinking drugs because their parents were. You know, some people follow in their footsteps quite often. You know, alcoholism it's almost like it looks hereditary because people follow on from what they see as they're growing up. Escapism. So many different forms of escapism. You can probably think of a few of your own, but to mask your problems, to forget. Yeah. Relaxation. So getting with the fun bit, people like to just relax. People smoke and it makes them relaxed. People drink, it makes them relaxed. Excitement, self-medication fits on top of the escapism, whether you're escaping physical pain, mental pain, problems, issues. Self-medication is one. When people start to self-medicate with substances, that's usually the beginning of an issue. Now, of course, you can be prescribed strong painkillers. Once you start taking them more often than they should be, or once you start taking them to excess, to master pains, that's when you start calling it self-medication. You can self-medicate through other drugs, and a lot of people do tend to self-medicate through alcohol. It could be religious. Can anyone just cast their minds and think of one religion that's probably quite famous for the participation in drug use? I'm talking about Rastafari and its cannabis use. Performance enhancing. Well, you can look at that in a number of different ways, whether it's in the gym, whether it's in the professional sports fields, or whether it's even in the bedroom. Yeah. Poverty. Poverty is one of those things people might escape from. And of course, drink and drugs are widely available and quite often are cheap as well, especially when you're when people are first offered them. To take small doses is usually quite cheap. It's when people are supporting an addiction that it becomes a particular problem. And then, of course, personal loss, whether that's bereavement, as mentioned before, it could be loss of a job, loss of a family breakdown, any kind of personal loss that might lead you to feel, I need a drink. In terms of alcohol, there's a funny saying that I've seen dotted around somewhere. Everyone, when I say everyone, anyone who drinks can usually find an excuse to drink. I've had a good day, I've had a bad day. My team's won, my team's lost. I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling down. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling okay. It counteracts always seems to be a good time to have a drink for drinkers. Yeah, myself included. Okay, let's have a little look back at the person's background, their upbringing. Okay, so we mentioned the upbringing bit before. Parents and family influences are touched on too. Socio-economic background. So that's about poverty. Socio-economic is about the economy of the local society. So whether they live in an area that's run down, whether there's some deprivation, high unemployment, you might live in areas where there's social exclusion. That might be an issue for people of the BME, ethnic minorities, where they might not have integrated very well into their local society. They have their own groups. So social exclusion could lead to substance misuse. Another good reason why integration is a key for us all getting on. Behavioural issues. People might be acting out, especially youngsters. Adults might turn to substance misuse because of behavioural issues within their family. Culture, as I mentioned before, and we also mentioned religion, the local community. I think we've talked about that quite a lot. The impact and the influence that their friends have on them, the income that they might have. Don't forget, it's not always poverty. If you've got a lot of disposable income, then of course spending it on substances might not be a problem for you. Yeah? A lot of it's affordable in a lot of ways for a lot of people, so therefore it's easily done. And then of course your type of job, so job stresses. Yeah? Whether it's high profile job or whether you're at the bottom of the ladder and you're under a lot of pressure because everybody dumps on you. Okay, so let's have a look at why. Yeah, let's look at the different types of drugs. So we're going to break these down into two categories first. We're going to look at legal and illegal. Then in that category, they break down into even more categories, and there's 4 of those. And we'll look specifically at opiates, stimulants, depressants, and hallucinogens. Now, don't worry if you don't know what all of those mean right now. We're going to look at those all individually. Now, I'm going to give you some examples first of legal substances and illegal substances. Okay. So legal, we might be looking at solvents and aerosols, alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine. There are 2 very highly addictive substances in there straight away in terms of alcohol and tobacco. 2 of the most addictive substances known to man. And then we have the illegal drugs. Some examples there are heroin, cocaine, cannabis, LSD, and NPS. I don't know if you know what NPS stands for, but it stands for novel psychoactive substance. You might know them better as the phrase legal high. However, legal highs are not legal anymore. So back in 2016, the government introduced a new Psychoactive Substance Act, which basically gave them the power to turn any psychoactive substance that had the ability to alter people's minds or their presence of mind and make them automatically illegal. So things like spice and stuff like that over the years that were considered legal, and every time they made them illegal, the people who produce it would come along, change one chemical compound, and then that would automatically make it legal again. So this gave the government a blanket ability to make everything illegal almost within that immediate time frame. Okay. Anyone got any questions so far? Don't forget, you can raise your hand at any time and I'll come to you. All right. I'd also like to say as well as if after this you go away and you start doing a bit of research and a bit of preparation for, I'm coming to you now, Emmanuel, a bit of preparation for your final exams, please feel free to contact me at any time if you want any clarification on anything or if you want to run any ideas by me. Emmanuel, if you could just unmute your microphone and then ask your question.
Sorry, are we definitely getting the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, you'll get a video of this. Don't worry about that. You'll get everything you need to prepare for your exams. Obviously, hopefully, you're taking notes today, and there'll be some things I'll ask you to go away and do a bit of research before, Emmanuel, but you will get a copy of this. It'll take about 24 hours or so to be uploaded onto YouTube, and we'll send you a link that nobody else will be able to access. So it won't be available on a wider search on YouTube. It'll only be available through the link that I send you.
Okay, thanks.
Is that okay, bud? Okay, so where were we? the different types. So we've broke down some examples of legal and illegal. Now, of course, they're not in an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. I would expect you to go away from here and look up more of these substances. And we're going to look at the categories that they fit under and what those categories do for us. And then we'll be looking at some of the side effects. And I will expect you to further this in your own time before your exams. You've got approximately, I would say, a week to 10 days maybe before you're going to get invited into the office. When I say you'll probably get an invitation as soon as this is over. But I would imagine that'll be a week to 10 days away before your appointment. So you've got a bit of time to recap everything. Okay. So different types. Let's look at the 4 categories that I mentioned before. Opiates. Opiates are always heroin-based, and they're used commonly and widely in medication as pain relief. Morphine, codeine, drugs that are based like that are quite often, or are definitely 100% based on heroin. Or opium, you might also know it as. It's why you'll see or hear a lot of stories of heroin addicts trying to break into pharmacies to get the heroin, the opium-based drugs, the strong codeine drugs and the morphine if they've got them on place. It's also why you might hear the stories of them drinking cough medicine as well, because a lot of cough medicines will contain a certain level of codeine, and it might be enough to take the edge away from any from any pain that they might be feeling. Okay, so quite serious drugs there, opiates. They get a category all of their own. And then we have stimulants. Some of these you might be very familiar with: amphetamines, speed, cocaine, cannabis. Strange on that. I've seen plenty of people smoke a lot of cannabis, do not look like they've been stimulated at all. But initially it's a stimulant, and as I like it in a lot of drugs, small amounts can have a big difference to larger amounts. Ecstasy is also a stimulant, known as a party drug. Some of these drugs might cross the borders as well. And then we have depressants, alcohol, sleeping pills, and sedatives. How many people drink alcohol to get depressed? As opposed to how many people drink alcohol and then become depressed? Of course, a lot of us, myself included in the past, will go out and drink alcohol because we're feeling down, to mask the pain. And of course, that's the worst thing you can do with alcohol, because it's a depressant. It will bring you further down. However, small amounts might give you a giddy high, and that's where you see people, who have a drink and they're quite merry, as they say, but then as they drink more and more of it, well, they usually end up slumped in the corner somewhere. Okay, and then we have a separate one for hallucinogens. Drugs like LSD, lysergic acid, very popular in the 60s and the 70s. LSD gives you strong hallucinations and, of course, a lot of energy too. And then, of course, things like magic mushrooms and ketamine are also strong hallucinogens. Magic mushrooms, up until a few years ago, were actually legal to own, especially if they were in their natural format of freshly picked. However, government rules again have changed recently to say that it's illegal to possess magic mushrooms in their natural form or prepared for use with psilocybin. Ketamine, also known as a horse tranquilizer, strong hallucinogen, quite a popular drug amongst the youth nowadays. I remember when I was younger hearing about ketamine, but it was very, very rare. Nowadays, it seems like it's quite widely available. Now, of course, the effects that you have on here, the opiates, they're quite well known for a really serious high. Heroin is a really, really powerful drug. Stimulants, we know that they're designed to give people energy. Problems with that could be overheating, dehydrating. Some of the big problems with stimulants, people drink water because they're dehydrating, but the excessive drinking of water can be the worst thing to do, because your body, under the influence of stimulants, won't actually process the water. It won't allow you to process it through the liver, and then obviously get rid of it that way. So you tend to find a lot of people who have suffered, or died on ecstasy, quite often do that because they drink too much water, and also not enough. So you can see how dangerous drugs like ecstasy can be. Cannabis use and ecstasy use has been widely, acclaimed or accredited to give like later life psychosis, memory loss. Not to mention, I've known people. I remember going to school with people, and I remember seeing them years afterwards, and they were heavily into smoking cannabis, and their whole demeanour was much slower than I ever remembered them being. They spoke slower. Their eyes were bloodshot. So, some examples there. Hallucinogens, again, they can be used to give excessive energy, but a lot of people would use them. A lot of creative people used hallucinogens in the past. Artists, musicians and stuff like that, because they felt that it gave them the ability to see things in a different level. Okay, so let's have a little look at the signs. Now, there's a video coming up next, but I'm not going to play it yet. I'm going to speak to you because last time we played the video, it didn't work very well. It works well on my end, but people were saying that it wasn't going across very well on their end. It was quite stuttery. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk a little bit about the signs and symptoms that you might expect to see with continued or short-term or even long-term drug use. Okay. Okay. So, hello. Can everyone see me? Hello?
I see you.
Can you still see me? Because my screen's gone all blank.
Yeah, still I see you.
Right. Just bear with me 1 second. I'll talk you through what's going on while my screen comes back up. Okay?
No worries. No problem.
Yeah, something's happening. So as long as I know you're still on the other end, that's fine. Okay, the application was unable to start correctly. I have no idea what that was. Right, can you still see the PowerPoint? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yep. You can. Right, fantastic.
Yes.
Because it's all come back on my end. I've no idea what shut itself down there, but thankfully it wasn't Zoom and it wasn't PowerPoint. Okay, so let me talk you through what was going to be said in this video. I don't know whether it's a video, it's called Crash. Okay, so signs and symptoms could include changes in physical behaviour or physical appearance. People losing weight, people even gaining weight in some areas, complexion issues. You're probably familiar with people looking like they've lost their teeth or even hair falling out, acne, sallow eyes, the yellowing of eyes, stuff like that. Even fingernails and stuff can start to change. Behavioral issues, mood swings, a change in their demeanour, they're changing their outlook on life and their priorities. You could see a change in their finances. For one, being quite affluent, they, and being comfortable, financially, they could now find themselves in a situation where maybe they are, they're struggling for money. It could be a sign there. You might see drug-related paraphernalia, or they might be wearing clothes that glamorise drug use. You look down through town and you see people with t-shirts and sweatshirts on that have, directly, attributed quotes and pictures and that with drug use. Appetite, they might suddenly not be eating. Loss of concentration, excessive sweating, excessive sleep, and lots of energy. Lack of energy. So you can see how right across the spectrum, we can see two very different sides of the story there. But also, don't forget that we might also be wrong about this. Yeah, we might all be very, very wrong about this. I've just put up on your screen there, a few examples of how somebody might look like they're abusing substances. Okay, so looking at those, have a little consider amongst yourself there why we could be wrong there. Consider why somebody looking dishevelled or unkempt could be something other than drug use. What about somebody who's suffering depression? What about somebody who maybe have a serious illness that might make them lose a lot of weight? Why else might somebody have excessive tiredness or energy? some mental health problems are connected to excessive tiredness, followed by excessive energy. You might want to maybe look up bipolar disorder. Yeah. Mood swings, and another thing that could come with mental illness, or depression, or stress, or anxiety. Yeah. Sudden change of social circle. Again, quite often that could be connected to substance misuse. But a change of friends could mean anything. It could mean that they've got a new job, they've met new people. It could be the start of something very, very different. Poor appetite. Is that because maybe they've got an eating disorder? Or maybe they're trying to lose weight. Maybe they're suppressing their appetite to try and change on their body image. Hence, weight loss or gain could be a big factor on that too. Loss of concentration, lack of sleep, maybe. Depression, anxiety, stress, excessive sleeping or sleeping at the wrong times. It could be a work thing. It could, again, depression, anxiety, stress, and to be fair, erratic behaviour would fit in all that. So you can see why, examples of why it might not always seem to be the case. Let me take you back to what I was saying at the start of the unit, when I was saying about people have quite often been misunderstood as being drunk when they're not. There was a high profile case. When I say high profile, it was in the local press quite a bit, where a young lady was refused entry to a club in town because the bouncer or the doorman said that she was too drunk to get in. Turned out the girl didn't drink, but she suffered from an illness that made her look unsteady on her feet, made her slur her words. Now, there are plenty of different illnesses that can do that for you, things like spina bifida and stuff like that. But she had this illness, and they turned her away. So she wasn't allowed to enjoy her night out based on what she looked like, when it was completely uncalled for. My sister-in-law, she runs a bar in Liverpool city centre, and she was telling me a story quite recently about how two taxi drivers refused to allow a lady into their car because she didn't look too sure about what she was doing or where she was going. The fact was, she was partially sighted and been left alone in the pub by her boyfriend after an argument, and she didn't have any of her visual aids with her because her boyfriend was looking after her. And it actually took the doorman to go to the second taxi driver and explain that she wasn't drunk, she was just struggling to see where she was going. So you can see how easy that would affect taxi driving. Now, the effects on individuals, I gave you some of those before. Okay, not seeming to be moving on there. There we go. So, the effects on individuals. Physical health, mentioned that before. Short term, maybe not, but long term, most definitely. Psychosis, mental health problems, brittle bones, especially the serious drugs like heroin and stuff like that. Sometimes the treatment for that can be just as bad. Quite often when you see your stereotypical heroin addict on the street and they've got lack of teeth and they're very, very thin and gaunt, more often than not, that's caused by the methadone that they take in substitute for the heroin. And the problem with that is methadone is a short-term solution for a long-term problem. But quite often drug addicts get left on methadone, and it can do them more harm physically in the long run. That's not me suggesting that they should be left to take heroin, but it means this shows that there's a lack of understanding in the treatment for people with heroin if they're being left on something that's got long-term health implications. Mental health, talked about that, psychosis, depression, mental health and substance misuse goes hand in hand. Whether one causes the other or vice versa, there always seems to be an issue. Drug and alcohol misuse amongst people who suffer from mental health is a very, very high percentage. And quite often, people who have had a history of substance misuse will develop mental health problems in later life. Finances, of course, I'm sure we're all aware how excessive drink and drug use can affect our finances, unless, of course, you're rich and famous. Family and friends, of course, it can see a breakdown of relationships and marriages, estrangement from our children and our closest friends. Homelessness, obviously, whether that's down to a breakdown of the family unit, or a financial issue. It's a, it's a very real possibility. Okay. Unemployment. And in the society, you see an increase of crime that's usually connected with drug use. I'm sure you've probably all read or know of crimes like people being mugged by heroin addicts, shoplifting. My wife used to work in retail. She used to manage a Poundland shop, which of course is, it's a big target for drug users, and they can go in there and they can try and swipe lots of stuff, and then they'll go on and sell it on for buttons elsewhere. The strain that gets put on the NHS, and obviously the NHS has been quite strange of recent times, having to deal with the current pandemic that we're all battling against. But of course, they still will be dealing with all the illnesses and everything else that go with treating people who've had substance problems, not to mention the accidents and the flashpoints that happen over a weekend. So crime and the NHS goes hand in hand there. I mean, you'd only have to go into a city centre anywhere, speak to doormen or bar staff, and there's not a single establishment in a city centre that won't have had its fair share of trouble on any given night, and it's usually alcohol or drug related. Antisocial behaviour, whether it is fighting in the streets or fighting in bars, or whether it's just making a nuisance of yourself or urinating in public, and quite often alcohol and drugs can throw off the shackles of inhibition, and people would do things that they wouldn't normally do. Then, of course, as an effect on crime, there's rising insurance costs. Areas that are quite often considered unsafe. I don't know about any of you guys, but I've spent my fair share of my life living in areas where there's high drug use and excessive crime and antisocial behaviour. And of course, there's areas there where I know that some of my neighbours wouldn't feel safe to go out the house once it gets dark, especially when there's groups of youths hanging around outside shops, off licenses, even pubs and stuff like that. Of course, the unemployment that might go with it. Yeah. So where can we go and get some support? This is where I'm going to give you a research task. Now, you don't have to send your answers in to me, but I would expect you to go away and research this, because you will be asked questions on where you can get support in your final exam. So from this, and you might want to make a note of this, don't forget it'll get sent out to you so you can access this part of the video at any given time. I'd like you to go and find 5 online support agencies. Okay. So when I say online support agencies, don't just find them online. Find ones that only operate online, that give advice and guidance out. They may have an attached phone number, but they don't have an office in town, or they don't have somewhere on the high street that you can go to. And then 5 places to visit physically. Now, these don't have to be places like the drink and drug centre in your local town centre. Think about the places where you might be the first port of call to you go physically to get help. Think about the people closest to you, and think about the people that might already know you one way or another already. Okay? And then find your closest needle exchanges. Now, you might think a needle exchange is only somewhere where a person who really wants to do drugs will go to get new needles and stuff. But don't forget, they're there to provide support and to keep people safe. So there'll be a whole range of support literature and mechanisms put in place there, and there'll be more of those dotted around than you're probably aware of. So I'd like you to spend some time doing that as part of your research. Okay, at this point, is there any further questions? Don't forget, you can raise your hand at any given time. No, are we all good?
Yeah.
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 You're good, or you have a question? It's always difficult to tell on this. Right. Let's look at the stereotypes then. Okay. So, if you cast your mind back to your taxi qual, you'll have been asked and done about stereotypes a few times. Some of you's got it right. Some of you's didn't do so well on this. So I'm going to tell you in words what a stereotype is. Okay. It's a preconceived notion about a group of people, or a person is attached to a group of people based on what people have said or what people think about them. So you're probably all well aware of some stereotypes, and some of them people might think are comedic. Some of them are not very nice at all. I'll give you an example. The old Scousers are thieves, or we're all on the dole, or we're all poor. None of us have got a job. All the usual stuff. Yeah. And then, of course, if I give you some particular people, you'll probably know the stereotypes of them. So the stereotypes of the Irish people, the way people stereotype Scottish people, the way people stereotype Welsh people, the way people stereotype Muslim people, yeah? The way people might stereotype Trump supporters, or the left or the right, whichever way you look at it, the world is full of stereotypes, and it's usually based on unfounded information given about a specific group of people. Okay, so what effect does stereotyping a drug user have as a drug user? Okay, now if you think about it, it can be quite detrimental to a drug user, and quite often when we talk to stereotype, it's not about the way the drug user thinks just, it's also about the way people think around the drug user too. So a negative attitude, consider what we mean by negative attitude. A negative attitude towards the drug user, or a negative attitude in the drug use themselves. Yeah. Just, So that negative attitude can be a two-way thing, yeah, where it'd be difficult to get through to a drug user because of their negative attitude based on the way they're treated or the way they're perceived. And then, of course, it's the negative attitude around some people that will never, ever be able to give people who have had drug or drink problems in the past a more positive outlook going forward. And you could also say that that's a bit judgmental, yeah. People are very happy or very quick to prejudge somebody who apparently has a drink or a drug problem. Yeah, I'm sure we've all at some point looked at somebody in the street and thought negative thoughts, or been judgmental about somebody who's excessively drunk, or somebody who looks like they're on the scrounge, or somebody looks like they might be up to no good. The whole stereotypical smackhead type of thing. Yeah, it can encourage aggression, not just from the user, but from the public as well. You might have seen examples where people have been, unnecessarily aggressive towards someone because they look drunk, or because they look like they might be on drugs. And then, of course, that aggression is usually quite often reciprocated. It will also make people less likely to seek help. We've all probably been somewhere in our lives where we think to ourselves, well, if that's what you think, that's what I'm going to do. It's a very easy way and mindset to fall into. Let's be hung for a sheep as a lamb. Yeah? Whether it's being out on a Friday night in the pub and somebody's expecting you home or whatever, and you think, well, I'm already late, I might as well stay out for a bit because I'm going to get shouted at. That's one very basic way of putting it. Yeah? If you grew up and your parents are like, you'll never amount to anything, you'll never do anything, you think to yourself, well, what's the point in trying if nobody thinks I'm going to do anything? And therefore, from a drug and alcohol point of view, people are less likely to seek help if they don't think they're going to be able to come through the other side of it. And then there's the way the media affects all this perception. Of course, it gets fueled, not just the papers and the news on the TV and the different ways they portray it, but don't forget other types of media like TV and film, or even music. Some of it gets quite clearly glamorized, whereas some of it does not. I'm sure if you picked up the paper tomorrow, well, maybe not tomorrow because nobody's actually allowed out to do this, but once we get out to the other side of lockdown, if you like, and people start going out and enjoying social gatherings and going drinking and whatever it is they choose to do, yeah, you'll only have to pick up the paper and you'll see how it will glamorize the lifestyle of certain people, but then castigate the lifestyle of others. Yeah, and I'm not saying which is right or wrong, but when you're rich and famous, it's seen as the done thing to do to be out on the town and be a little bit worse for wear. However, if you go into a city centre and you see people brawling and fighting and they're not rich and famous, well, it's incredibly frowned upon. You only have to look at, say, pick up the Daily Mail after 80 races and look at the way they portray the girls of Liverpool, the alleged girls of Liverpool, when most of them aren't. They don't come from all over the country, are portrayed in the media. And then look at, like, bands like Girls Aloud, or whenever they're out on the town, regardless of how drunk they can be, they're all just having a good time and party goers. And then we have films. Give me a thumbs up if your favourite film or TV show is some way connected to drug use. Whether it's a gangster film that has drug dealing in it, or it's a film about people who take drugs. I'll give you an example of Scarface there. But, there's lots and lots of TV shows out there that centre around drugs, guns, violence, everything else. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the music scene, where the music scene's always glamorized the excessive lifestyle, especially the rock and roll kind of scene. I mean, I'm a rocker. I've been into rock and roll music all my life, and some of my biggest influences on my life in terms of my heroes, well, they spent most of their adult life in some sort of drug or drink-induced coma. People like Jim Morrison of The Doors, and people like Amy Winehouse, Ozzy Osbourne. I'm sure you're quite famous, quite aware with all his famous antics. And of course, people have written books on it, and people read the books because they want to know what they got up to, and the films and everything else. Okay, so you can see there's a wide range of how we're affected by the media there. Okay, so statistics. Okay. Let me give you some stats based on the latest version of statistics released by the UK government. 9 million people drink more than the recommended daily limit. Okay. The harms of this misuse are estimated to cost England, just England alone, £21 billion a year. Alcohol is 61% more affordable than it was in the late 80s. Now, some of you may know exactly what that means, but in layman's terms, the cost of a drink in the 80s would take up more of your weekly wage then than what it does in the equivalent amount now. So you might think to yourself, in the 80s, you get a pint for like 70 pence or 80 pence or something like that. But of course, I remember, my first ever jobs were in the 80s, and of course, I was lucky to be on £30 a week. Right? Around a third of adults claim to have taken illicit substances sometime in their lifetime. So that's 1 in 3 have claimed to take some sort of illicit substance. Yeah. Around 1 in 11, that's only 9.4% of adults aged 16 to 59 have taken a drug in the last year. Might only be 9.4%, but it equates to 3.2 million people in this country. Around 1 in 5 adults aged 16 to 24 are taking a drug in the last year. So 1.3 million people of our youngsters, 20% of them are admitted to taking some sort of drug in the last year. Ketamine use has increased from a decade ago, across both age groups. So that backs up a little bit of what I was saying before about ketamine seems to be a much more widely acceptably used drug. And then, of course, I made reference to this before as well, the balloons, nitrous oxide, laughing gas, you might know it as. Any ladies in the room, if you've given birth, you might know it as gas and air or Entonox. Yeah? The second most used drugs amongst the children in our or youngsters in our society. Second behind only cannabis. Now, where do you think I told you where I got these from? So where other places do you think you would be able to get statistics on drug and alcohol misuse? So, first up, the NHS would be a good place to go, because obviously they set up treatment plans. They will see people who are admitted to hospital, whether it's A&E with drink or drug related problems. We've got the Office of National Statistics. I think everybody must know the ONS right now, if you didn't know them before, because they're quoted every single day on the news. Local councils would also be a good place to go because they keep these kind of stats based on their local community. And council websites can be a tremendous source for information if you want source information on a local area. You can find out everything from the drink and drug use figures to unemployment rates, to people who are socially uneconomic in terms of, like, people who are not working or on benefits. You'll find information based on the breakdown of the ethnic backgrounds and stuff. So the council will have a lot of this information. And then there are charities. When I say charities, I don't mean just slipping down the road to Oxfam or whatever. I'm talking about drug-related charities, places like the Salvation Army, charities that are set up to help people with drugs. So they will all have that information. And of course, they will treat it highly confidential, but they could give you information like, last year we treated 365,000 people for drug abuse in the Liverpool area. The police could give you, freedom of information. Actually, you see from the police how many arrests they made, how many people were arrested for drink driving, how many people were stopped and tested positive for drug driving. Incidentally, when it comes to drug driving in the Merseyside area, and I'm sure we're not alone, for the first time in history, in the last 12 months, the rate for stopping and positive arrests for drug driving has exceeded the limit for drink driving for the first time in history. So it shows you how much of a problem or how normalised drug use in society has actually become. Now, what you've got to ask yourself is, how accurate are these statistics likely to be? Yeah. Consider these three questions when you're thinking about it. If somebody goes to a hospital, yeah, and is asked about whether they've taken drugs because they fell over and, I don't know, maybe gashed their head, and you think, telling the truth is not going to do me any favours here. How many people are likely to tell the truth? How many people amongst ourselves have ever been asked about how many we smoke a day? Or how much do we drink when we go to doctors? Have we told the truth? Yeah? And of course, a lot of these figures will be based on people who've sought help for any kind of drink or drug-related incident or illness. So, of course, there's a strong chance that these figures that I've quoted here and the places I've told you, they can't be entirely accurate. Now, how do we respond to the problem that is drug use? I'm going to just give you some examples here, and you might go away and do some research on this, considering the kind of different things and the different people that we're looking at and the different areas of society. But the four areas we're going to look at is education, treatment, control, and of course, policy. Yeah, it's all about resilience. The idea is that when we're going to help people, deal with the problems that come with drink and drugs, it's about building resilience, and resilience just means bounce back ability. How can people get clean and stay clean? That's what resilience is all about. It's a bit of a buzzword at the minute, resilience, because we talk about resilience in mental health and everything else, and making people resilient to the factors that cause them to have mental health issues or to seek substances in the first place. So, education. When it comes to education, what are we looking at? Yeah, school, the workplace, the community, families. Yeah. Do we talk about the dangers that are drugs, or do we talk about the effects of drugs in terms of being totally honest instead of trying to scare people? Do we educate people about what drugs are? Yeah. Treatment. I mentioned it before. How do we treat people on drugs? Is it a one-size treatment fits all? Is it person-centered enough? If people are treated and educated about drugs at the same time, would that work more? Would it not? I don't know. To be fair, if I did know, I'd probably be a very wealthy man. Yeah. Can treatment bring stability to people's lifestyles, which would help bring resilience about? And then we have control and policy. Yeah. Big problem we have there is it's a very, very difficult thing to do because there's always people who are pro and for against the legalization of drugs. Some people are like, well, let's just legalize some of them. Some people look to other countries in the world and say, well, look at what they've done. It might work for them. I don't know if you've ever been to Amsterdam, but people go to Amsterdam and they think it's a free-for-all. They can go over there and do whatever they want. It's not actually the case. The drug policy in Amsterdam is very similar to the drug policy in Merseyside, where cannabis has been decriminalised, which means basically you can get away with smoking or using small amounts, but you're still not meant to walk around the street with it. In Amsterdam, it's only supposed to be used in licensed purposes, but if you go to Amsterdam, you see people just wandering around the streets doing what they want because that's what they believe it is, and it's become very, very difficult to police. If you've been to Amsterdam and you've not seen any drunken or erratic behaviour or antisocial behaviour from the tourists, then you've been very lucky. So using Amsterdam as an example might not necessarily be the perfect example. However, there are other places around the world that have tried stuff and it works very differently. I believe Portugal have got a different outlook on drugs and theirs does seem to be working. So who knows what's down for us in the future. But the control could be about how we get drugs into the country, what we can do to stop it. Yeah? Do you tighten up the borders? Do you maybe make a bigger crime to not just deal drugs, but possess drugs? If people are not afraid of being caught with drugs on their possession, then they do it. You only have to look around the streets now how it's been normalised. You walk down the street and there's groups of people who quite happily smoke cannabis that the whole world can smell, and they're not bothered in the slightest that people know. You go to a bar in town, and you can see the evidence of drug use in front of your very eyes. It's like some people carry it like a badge of honour. Yeah? Whether policy needs to change to reflect that, who knows? Who knows what it is? But go away and obviously when you're doing your group work. Sorry, you can't do group work. We're all isolated. When you're doing your research, have a look at this. Have a look at the pros and cons. Have a look at the different types of policies they've put in. Consider the different types. Think about parenting. Think about educating the family unit. Who knows where this is all going to go? So, I'm just going to go through a quite recap here, and I want you to try and answer these in your head as I go through them. True or false? All drugs are illegal.
False.
Hello, thank you, Saba. It is false, you're right. You don't have to answer this to me out loud. You can just think about it. But if you do want to decide you do want to interact, feel free. 3 examples of why someone may use substances. Yeah. So I gave you that's right back at the beginning of the unit. Whole plethora of reasons why people might turn to substances, all from the very, very nicest of reasons to the very, very darkest of reasons. 3 examples of illegal drugs. Now, of course, I don't expect you to just use the ones that I gave you. When you're doing your research and your revision for this, get online, have a look at all the different types of drugs, the different names they're given. There's some very, very good resources out there where you can go and you can find out all about drugs. The Talk to Frank website is really, really good. And, you can find out information about drugs and all the different names that they come under. 2 effects of stereotyping, well, we spoke about that in quite some detail. Yeah. 2 examples of where to get support. Well, you're going to go away and find out at least 15 for me. Okay. Can you provide 4 symptoms of substance misuse? So the symptoms, the effect, what you would see. Now, we talked about people's health and stuff like that, but don't forget, what leads you to think that somebody might be using drugs in the first place? Is it their eyes? Is it their speech? Is it the way their body's holding themselves? Yeah. 2 examples of legal drugs. 3 factors from a person's background that could lead to substance abuse. 2 effects on a user, short or long term. Yeah. And then 2 examples of where the media could influence our perceptions. Now that brings me to an end of the slideshow, guys. Any questions for me, whether it's about this or absolutely anything else? I'm quite happy to sit here for a few minutes and field your questions.
No, sir. Thank you. Thank you,
Jan.
Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
No, all good here.
Okay, Dave?
No.
No, all good?
Yeah.
Okay. With that in mind then, I'd like to thank you for your time. Wish you the very best of luck. I will be the tutor that will be effectively doing your final assessment, so I'll probably see you in a week or so's time. Until then, stay safe, wash your hands, take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you.
Goodbye now.
Take care, bye-bye
Bye
now.
bye. See ya.
See you soon.
Thank you. Right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.